Welcome to today's discussion of Beastiary by Julio Cortazar, perhaps his most famous international story. In this story, we have, again, a narrator who is not reliable. Isabel, we meet her in the beginning, is a child, and we see things through her childish eyes. The very beginning starts out with her eating rice pudding, not enough cinnamon, too bad. Kind of the way a child might focus on the details, and the story's full of details. In fact, the details tell the story in many ways. So we meet Isabel, and she's a child, and sounds like she's a somewhat unruly child because her mother and her sister talk about, toys everywhere, temper tantrums, not sleeping at night. She's dirty. Her shoes are dirty. She plays in the dirt. Maybe something of a tomboy, and maybe spoiled. I think they actually say spoiled. So when the cousins call and invite her out to Orneos for the summer, the mother's hesitant, but the sister thinks, oh, maybe this is the best thing. Not perfect. We think the place is sad. There's that terrible tiger. But, and there's only Nino, the one child to play with, but really it's in their best interest to kind of get rid of Isabel for the summer. And in this sense, the sister is kind of like an ally with the mother against Isabel. And we don't really get the impression that she's really deeply loved and respected by her own family. So she's sent off to visit the Funes, who are relatives. And the Funes are comprised of 3 siblings. There's the kid, who's the youngest probably. There's Rema, a woman. And then there is brother Luis, who is probably the oldest. We don't know for sure. But they are siblings, and they have their own characters. Luis is a philosopher, or at least he's so sarcastically called a philosopher. He is Nino's father, if you read it very carefully. He's a very loving father to Nino. He helps him with his science experiment, with the ant farm and collecting insects, and buys him a microscope and really encourages the children to play. He seems like a very gentle man, but he doesn't really do much of anything. He sits around and reads all the time. And Rema is the mother figure, at least for Nino. We don't really know who the mother of Nino is, but we know that she takes care of everything. She runs the kitchen. They have servants, so they are obviously upper class, but she orders the servants about. She plans everything. She has great hands. Isabel's always talking about how soothing it is to feel Rema's hands on her head. And she's very attentive to Isabel, and maybe more loving to Isabel even than her own mother. And Isabel reciprocates. She just loves Rema. And at first, Isabel's filled with excitement about going to visit the Funes family, and she spends her days fantasizing about how much fun it's going to be, and she's excited to go there. And she goes out there, and she meets Nino, who's her relative, who's a little younger than her. Nino, by the way, pronounces Nino in Spanish would be a little boy, and presumably she's a little bit older than him. But they go out in the fields, and they collect insects, and they collect plants, and they decide to put together an ant farm. And Nino is all about science and about collecting insects and animals. And Isabel is more a scientist. She keeps notes on everything. She has notebooks and journals. She labels everything with their names. So she's very organized and methodical about studying the animal life, and the insect life, I should say. And we have a tiger, this mysterious creature that wanders around the farm, goes from room to room. And they find out through the head branching hand where the tiger is, and they avoid the tiger. The family is constantly avoiding the rooms where the tiger is, and sometimes the kids have to move around. Let's talk for a minute about the name El Horneo. El Horneo is a kind of bird that builds a nest in the shape of an oven. And presumably these siblings with Nino are kind of trapped inside this nest. They're adults now. The siblings are all adults, but they haven't left home. They can't really leave home. There's really nowhere else for them to go. And so they are like children in the sense that none of them really works, but they are adults in the sense that they have adult responsibilities, but they've been provided for by their father, and they have this wonderful place to live that's almost feudal. That's feudal as in feudalism, not futile. Okay, and orno, the word horneo comes from horno, and horno in Spanish means an oven. And in some ways, the house is kind of like an oven. Isabel is there in the summer, and we hear of the great heat and how it affects everybody. So it's like they're all trapped inside a giant oven in the summertime. Okay, so let's see. Let's talk for a little bit about Isabel and how she changes. Isabel is a child, as we've mentioned, when she comes. She's rambunctious and enthusiastic, but after a certain point she changes. She's studying this ant farm that she's so fascinated by, and which in itself is kind of symbolic. She compares it to the El Horneo, the household, and says that it's like a little micro horneo, that the only thing that's missing is a tiger. If only she could put a little tiger in there. And at this point she starts to think, and she thinks maybe she doesn't like the ant farm so much, and maybe she wants to get rid of it. And maybe this is not such a happy place. She writes a letter to her mother saying, I'm having a great time, it's lots of fun, but come see Rema. She's depressed, she's sad, she needs you to come see her. And she starts to become closer and closer to Rema, and farther and farther away from Nina, who she now sees as a little child. And she's not so much interested in collecting bugs and insects as much as she used to be. And to a certain extent, you can almost say that she turns that scientific study of insects onto a study of the family, the family that's trapped inside. So let's talk a minute about about the kid and Rema. In the opening, we read about how the kid is sitting on the porch outside in the hot summer, and Rema brings him a glass of lemonade. And he reaches for it, but he kind of drops it. Instead, he grabs her hand. And Rema doesn't like this. She pulls her hand back, and he's laughing. So it's not about the lemonade. He just wants to grab hold of Rema. And Rema doesn't like it. And then later, towards the end of the story, it's a hot summer night, almost at the very end, the night before. She's going to bed. She says goodnight to Louise, and he says, oh, you should be in bed now. You're just a kid. Why don't you go to bed? But first go tell Rema to bring me some lemonade. Here we are with lemonade again. Lemonade, which is maybe code for something else. So Isabel goes to the kitchen, says goodnight to Rema. Rema's very sad. She says, the kid would like his lemonade. He wants you to bring him some lemonade. And Rema says, no, I'll make the lemonade, but I want you to take it to the kid. And Isabel responds, no, he said he specifically wanted you to take it. And Rema just says, please, please, please. So at this point, Isabel has really got her antenna out, and she realizes that Rema doesn't want to be around Louise. And she takes the lemonade. Isabel takes the lemonade. Not Louise, I'm meaning the kid. I always make that mistake. So she takes the lemonade to the kid. And he said, I wanted Rema to bring it to me. And Isabel responds, well, she told me to bring it. So then Isabel goes to bed. And later in the night, she hears Rema crying. And she remembers all the time she's heard Rema crying at night. And how sad Rema always seems to be. And she starts to think, and she starts to analyze. Let's talk a minute again about Louise. We've seen Louise, the kid, seems very spoiled even though he's an adult. He's sarcastic to his brother when he calls him the philosopher. He's very sarcastic. He's always kind of mean to people. When Nino breaks the window to his room, he he hits him and he beats him up in front of Rama, constantly looking at Rama and laughing. He is, in fact, a bully. He's bullying Rama. He's also bullying Nino. So we know he has this cruel streak to him. He's almost sadistic. So he's not a very nice person. And in fact, when Louise is told something about him, he says, oh, that bastard. And so nobody really likes the kid. And so here we have Isabel that night lying in bed, listening to Rama cry, thinking about what's going on, thinking about how to solve the problem, really. But she doesn't say that. She just, hates that animal or the ant farm. She wants to get rid of it. And she turns on the light, and the ants are frantically trying to get out. And she thinks, in some ways that's like the people in Orneo. It's like Rama with nowhere to go. And so she gets up in the morning, and she finds out where the tiger is. She says that it's in Louise's room, but really it's in the kid's room. So after lunch, the kid or after breakfast, I can't remember, the kid goes back to his room and the tiger eats him alive. So Louise's response is, I don't understand. She told us it was in my room. But Rama just kind of holds on to Isabel and cries. She doesn't even go to see what's happening. She doesn't try and stop it. And Isabel says she feels this incredible gratitude and then this incredible happiness. So I would suggest that Isabel has played the role of judge and the tiger is executioner. That Isabel has figured out that the kid is sexually abusing Rama. And that this is really the white elephant in the house. Nobody talks about it. Everybody knows about it. Maybe her own mother and sister know about it. Everyone knows that Rama's sad, but nobody will do anything to stop the violence against her. So Isabel takes it into her own hands and figures out, a way to get rid of the kid. So I think I would suggest that midpoint in the story, Isabel starts to grow up. She's no longer the little child she was before. Her loyalties have shifted, and she feels empowered to make a decision resulting in the death of the kid. So basically, that leaves us simply with the question of what is the tiger? We know in magical realism that magical things can happen, and this is kind of a magical tiger. We know Borges was fascinated with tigers. They occur and reoccur in many of his stories. And Cortazar, no doubt, was very influenced by Borges, even though he's writing a little bit later. So I would suggest that the tiger is kind of a metaphor for the things the family can't talk about, and the fact that they're kind of held at the mercy of this beast, hence the name Beastiary. At the same time, the house is a kind of bestiary. It's got two beasts. It's got the tiger and it's got the kid, who's also a beast. So, as you think about how you're going to write your short story analysis for class, I want you to think about the ways I've analyzed these stories. And look always for a deeper meaning and read them carefully and read them very slowly. Remember, you can choose any of the Borges stories that I haven't talked about, that we haven't read as assigned readings, and any of the Cortazar stories in the additional stories by Cortazar. Borges is undoubtedly easier. Cortazar is very interesting. He does a lot of interesting things with narrator and time. Borges does some interesting things with time and narrator, but Cortazar really is very, very Freudian, or very into, mental illness or mental disabilities. So we find this less so in Borges, more so. Borges is very rational. Everyone's very rational. And so we find this very much in Cortazar. And I hope that you'll continue to read the other Cortazar stories. I'll talk tomorrow about Blow Up. And look at the additional stories, and there's a wide range of them. They're not all psychotic. There's lots of different ones. Look at the Borges ones. that we haven't discussed or you haven't read for class, and try to find one that you feel you have some insight